Government terms to know. These are the government terms you need to understand for this unit. And if you think of the government terms in terms of two categories, you've got who rules over you, or you can consider that citizen participation. That's in one category, and every country in the world falls into that category. The other category is countries then need to decide, after they've decided who rules them, how are they going to distribute their power, okay? So if you think in terms of those two categories, it helps you kind of fit these words together. How are the three ways citizens participate, or how are they going to determine who rules over them? There's three different ways. There's autocracy, oligarchy, or oligarch, or democracy. Those are the three ways that you are ruled or that citizens participate. In an autocracy, like the word kind of indicates, you've got an automobile, means that one person's driving, just like one person's driving a car. Autocratic means the rule of one. A country or nation is governed by one single person with unlimited power, and there's little to no citizen participation. Autocratic leaders have total control. What are two examples of an autocratic government? There's two examples in your vocab terms. There's a dictator and an absolute monarchy. And the dictatorship and absolute monarchy are very similar because it is a ruler that has total control. But here's kind of the difference. In a dictatorship, a government's controlled by a single, usually it's a military leader. They usually have like a military government, and it's a military leader. They use the military to enforce their laws, have total social and political control over a country, and again, there's little to no citizen participation. In an absolute monarchy, again, there's one person who rules, and they have all the power, total control. Like the picture shows, Louis XIV has very little patience for the lowly citizens. There's very little to no citizen participation. One of the big differences between an absolute monarchy and a dictatorship, though, is this. Power, if Louis XIV dies, is passed down to his heirs. So anybody that is a blood relative of Louis XIV would then become the next king. Or if it is a female, it would be a queen. So it's passed down through blood relation, or kind of think of it at the family tree. What's one of the big differences between an absolute monarchy and a dictatorship? Dictatorships today are more common than an absolute monarchy. The second category of who rules over us, or citizen participation, is an oligarchy. And much like an autocracy, citizens have very little say in their government. So they have very little participation. An oligarchy, though, is a little different than an autocracy in that you've got a small group of people that rule over you. So instead of one, we're looking at two or more. A small group of people, oftentimes they're wealthy, or they have a high social or powerful status, and that's how they've gained their power. And that's what an oligarchy is. The third way people are ruled is a democracy. And we're pretty familiar with democracies in that that's what we have in our country. We have two different types of democracies, but one thing that all democracies have in common is they all get their power from the people. The people get their power through voting, and all democracies vote in their lawmakers or the legislative branch. That is common for every democracy. They always vote in their lawmakers because those are the people that make the laws of the land, and that's who you want to make sure that you're voting for. There are two types of democracies. There's a parliamentary democracy and a presidential democracy, and we're going to take a look at each of those. Okay, so in a parliamentary democracy, the citizens vote for the legislative branch, and they're done. They're only voting for one branch because basically that's the only branch that they have in that government. The citizens do not directly vote for their leader. They're selecting their legislature only. And if you look over here at kind of my little picture diagram, you've got the citizens, they're voting. They pick then the parliament. And the parliament does not do paper, scissors, parliament to pick the leader. but they do pick from the majority party, and that is how the leader is selected. The parliament and the executive branch is all one branch. They are not separate. I'll say that again. Parliament, or the legislative branch, is the same as the executive branch because the legislative branch picks the executive branch. So they're tied together, okay? They're kind of one extended branch. In a presidential democracy, it is a bit different. They choose their leader, and the big difference is how the leader is selected, because both do vote and both do have a vote for the legislative branch. But here's where it's different. Citizens then vote not only on the legislative branch, they also vote on the executive branch and the leader of the country. So in a parliamentary democracy, they're only voting for the legislative branch. In a presidential, you're voting for the executive and the legislative branch. They're two separate branches. You're voting for two separate branches to fill that position. Okay, they are separate branches compared to the parliament, which is one branch. Okay, and this diagram kind of illustrates it well in a nice little comparison. So citizens in a parliamentary system pick the legislature. The people in the legislature then select the executive or the leader. Okay, so sometimes, or most oftentimes, the leader is called a prime minister, but sometimes the title is something different, like chancellor. So it's more important that you understand how the leader is picked here rather than the title. So the citizens are voting once for the legislative branch because the legislative branch is then picking the executive branch. In a presidential system, again, executive branch is separate from the legislative branch, so there's two separate ballot elections for those two separate branches. Okay? Hopefully that made it a little bit more clear. What are the three ways government distributes power? If any question says how the government distributes power, then you're looking at eliminating anything that has to do with citizen participation or who rules. There's really only three ways government distributes power, and you can eliminate all the other terms except for those three, and they are unitary, federal, and confederate. In a unitary system, the central government has all the power, and it makes all the decision. Anytime you see one agency or central power having all the power, just like the picture illustrates, with one group, person has all the power, it's all centralized in one place or one spot, that's unitary. And if you think about it, let's go back. A unicycle is one wheel, all the power is in one place. It's a good way to remember it. Federal or federation is power that rests between the central government and the states. So it is shared and divided. You got states that have some power. You also have the central government that has power. And you see the arrow here going back and forth because power is in both places. It's spread out and divided and shared. Okay, and that gives you a picture of federal. You see the power structures or the power bubbles are pretty much the same. The size of them are the same because the central government can't go and take over. All the power is distributed and shared between the central government and the states. In a confederation, though, it's exactly the opposite of unitary. Where all the power in unitary is centered in one spot, in a confederation, all the individual states make their own decisions. Sometimes these states are actually countries that join together for a common cause. One thing that's always present is there's a weak central government and strong states or countries. Everybody agrees to cooperate, and that's a big part of it. We've got the Olympics going on. It's like a swim team. All those swimmers are coming from all different parts of the country. They all gather, they pick the best of the best to cooperate for a common cause, and that's to win an event. It's much like what countries do. They agree to cooperate, and oftentimes it's to make money or maybe for a common defense. But the states are strong, the central government is weak. and it looks like this. You see the power structures here is spread all out into the regions or the states. Central government or central authority has very little. And that ends our review of the government vocab. Best of luck.